Hook, what would you do if your family was ripped away right in front of your eyes? For 13-year-old Ethan, silence was no longer an option. With nothing but fear in his heart and a flashlight in his hand, he set out to face the darkness and save the people he loved most. This is a story of courage, love, and one boy's fight against impossible odds. You won't believe how it ends. The town of Riverbend was a quiet place, nestled between thick forests and endless fields. To most, it was the kind of town where nothing ever happened, until the day everything changed for 13-year-old Ethan. Ethan was the kind of boy who blended into the background. At school, he sat in the back of the class, his voice barely above a whisper. His classmates teased him, calling him Silent Ethan, but he didn't mind. He wasn't interested in being noticed. He was happy with his small world, which revolved around his mom, his little sister Ava, and their tiny house at the edge of the woods. But one cold November evening, Ethan's quiet life shattered. It began like any other night. Ethan was finishing his homework in the living room while Ava, only 7, played with her favorite stuffed bunny. Their mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The warm smell of roasted chicken filled the house, wrapping them in a sense of safety that felt unbreakable. Then came the sound. A loud bang at the front door made Ethan jump. He froze, his pencil slipping from his hand. Ava looked up, her big brown eyes wide with fear. "Stay here," their mom whispered, her voice low and trembling. Ethan watched as she walked to the door, peering through the small peephole. Whoever was on the other side pounded again, harder this time. Before she could react, the door burst open, splintering wood flying in all directions. 3 men stormed inside, their faces shadowed by dark hoodies. One of them, tall with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "Where's the money, Julia?" he snarled. Ethan's mom froze, her face pale. I don't have it. I told you. I don't know anything about that anymore." The man with the scar didn't like that answer. He nodded to the others, and before Ethan could process what was happening, they grabbed his mom and Ava. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, standing up, but one of the men turned and glared at him, pulling a knife from his belt. "Sit down, kid," he growled. Ethan's legs felt like jelly as he dropped back into his chair, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. "Let them go!" he cried, tears streaming down his face. But the men didn't listen. They dragged his mom and Ava toward the door. Ethan tried to move, to stop them, but fear kept him frozen in place. The last thing he saw was Ava's terrified face as she screamed his name, clutching her bunny tightly. And then, they were gone. For hours, Ethan sat in the silence of the empty house, his mind racing. He was terrified, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stay silent anymore. He had to do something. He grabbed the phone and called 911. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher everything. The break-in, the men, the way they'd taken his mom and Ava. When the police arrived, Ethan felt a small flicker of hope. Officer Daniels, a kind-looking man with graying hair, knelt down to Ethan's level. "You're brave for calling us, Ethan," he said. "We're going to do everything we can to bring your mom and sister back, but we need your help. Can you tell us anything about the men?" Ethan nodded, his hands still shaking. "One of them had a scar on his face, and they said something about money. I think they've been here before. My mom always seemed scared of someone, but she never told me why." Officer Daniels nodded, his face serious. "That's good, Ethan. We'll look into it." The officers quickly pieced together the clues. Ethan's mom had once worked for a man tied to illegal dealings, and it seemed her past had caught up with her. The men had likely taken her and Ava to an abandoned warehouse just outside of town, a place the police had been watching for months. As the officers prepared to move, Ethan's heart raced. He wanted to go with them, to help, but they insisted he stay behind. "You've done enough, Ethan," Officer Daniels said. "Now let us handle it." But as the police cars sped away, Ethan couldn't sit still. He grabbed his flashlight and his bike, his fear replaced by a fierce determination. He wasn't going to let the men hurt his family. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its broken windows glowing faintly in the moonlight. Ethan's stomach churned as he approached, his flashlight trembling in his hand. He could hear muffled voices inside, angry shouts and Ava's small, terrified cries. Ethan crept around the side of the building, peering through a crack in the wall. He saw his mom and Ava tied to chairs, the scar-faced man towering over them. "You've got one more chance," he snarled. "Where's the money?" Ethan's mom shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't have it," she whispered. Ethan felt a surge of anger. He couldn't let this happen. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens filled the air, and the warehouse erupted into chaos. The men scrambled, shouting orders, but it was too late. The police stormed in, shouting commands. Ethan ran inside, dodging officers and debris, until he reached his mom and Ava. "Ethan!" his mom cried, her voice filled with relief. "I'm here," he said, quickly untying them. "You're safe now." Hours later, back at the police station, Ethan sat with his mom and Ava, holding their hands tightly. Officer Daniels approached, a small smile on his face. "You're a hero, Ethan," he said. "You didn't stay silent. Because of you, your mom and sister are safe." Ethan looked at Ava, who was clutching her bunny and smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. He realized that being brave wasn't about not being scared. It was about speaking up, even when it was the hardest thing to do. From that day on, Ethan was no longer Silent Ethan. He was the boy who stood up against the darkness and won. "You said,